Now, you might have heard that Ozempic is really, really good at making you lose weight. But the thing is, when we understand a little bit more on how Ozempic works in the first place, we can see that some of the side effects like nausea, vomiting, or just really, really a lot of stomach pain are not most likely side effects, but they are very, very likely to happen. Now, to do this, we're going to have to understand a little bit more on how Ozempic works in the first place. And the crazy part to all of this is at the very end, I'll be mentioning a solution which is far more not only effective, but it is far better at losing weight as well, and a host and a myriad of other effects which are really, really beneficial. Now, what exactly makes Ozempic work in the first place? Well, all it really does is it targets GLP-1. Now, GLP-1 basically just stands for glucagon like peptide 1. Now, the thing is, with GLP-1, what it causes the pancreas to do is it causes it to secrete insulin before basically glucose is even in the bloodstream. Now, this can be helpful in some instances, but we'll see really carefully that afterwards it might not be so helpful. Now, the thing is, with GLP-1, increasing it also causes some other things to happen. And just to name some examples, the first one would be the inhibition of glucagon secretion, which I've talked a little bit about before. 2, slows the gastric emptying, which is also important. And 3, reduces appetite, which can be good or bad depending on whether or not you are or are not malnourished in the first place. Now, just looking at all of this from a surface level, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a deal, but when we dive a little deeper, we'll see that there definitely can be some problems occurring. Now, inhibiting glucagon secretion doesn't sound all that bad until you realize one really important factor, and that's the fact that if your blood sugar levels go below a certain point, then you've got some really, really big problems. Now, this specifically applies to people who have problems with diabetes and such, because that mixed with Ozempic, there can definitely be some complications. Now, the real problem with this is the fact that your red blood cells require glucose as a fuel source, and they are the only cells that cannot function without glucose. The rest of your cells can function without glucose, and they can get it through fatty acid, although your body has to be going through gluconeogenesis for that to occur in the first place. So inhibiting glucagon really affects the people who are either receiving insulin or any sort of glucose lowering medications. Next, I'll be talking a little bit about slowing the gastric process. Now, we know that GLP-1 slows the gastric process, but the problem in doing so of slowing the gastric process is things could happen like nausea, vomiting, bloating, discomfort, and there is one more that in particular I think is probably the most important of them all, out of all of them, and it's nutrient malabsorption. Now, if you've seen my video on why you don't get enough nutrients from plants in the first place, as well as why plants, the bioavailability of nutrients is so unbelievably low, then we will see very, very quickly we got some problems here. Now, as you might already know, much of the modern food today has plenty of things that already prevent nutrient malabsorption and the hindrance of these nutrients in the first place. And this is a problem, because if we mix this with Ozempic, which can cause nutrient malabsorption in the process because it slows the gastric process, then we can see that people might become even more malnourished than they previously were. And this can be a very, very big problem. Now, just to name some of the examples of nutrient malabsorption coming from plants, it could be tannins, it could be oxalates, and it could be fiber as well. There are plenty of things that prevent nutrient absorption. I mean, beta carotene is another one. Well, it's very, very low when it comes to bioavailability. I mean, there's plenty of things. So if we just look at it from that perspective itself, then we can see very, very quickly that there's going to be some really, really big problems coming from Ozempic in the first place. Because if you already aren't getting enough nutrients and you're already basically malnourished, then yeah, you got some problems, because you're going to be even more malnourished if you take Ozempic. Now, that brings us to our third point, which, if I already said the first two and the second one might have really got you, the third one is the fact that it reduces appetite. Now, again, if you're malnourished, it's a double malnourishing effect. So if you already slow the gastric process, and not only that, you are consuming so many phytotoxins which inhibit nutrients to be absorbed and minerals to be absorbed, then there's going to be a problem, because with the reduced appetite, you're going to eat even less, which means you're going to get even less of the essential nutrients that you need in the first place. And that's a big problem, because when you don't get the essential nutrients that you need, you can develop a lot of other problems. And I mean a lot of other problems. And yes, by a lot of problems, I mean potential long-term damage that you will never be able to undo for the rest of your life. Now, what's really crazy is there's actually a really, really simple way to lose weight, and not only lose the weight temporarily, but lose it completely. But this all has to do with the underlying glycemic state and understanding a little bit on the insulin to glucagon ratio. Now, Benjamin Bikman in particular talks about this a lot. So if you haven't seen him, then he would be a great source in understanding how lipolysis occurs in the first place, or losing weight. But in this case, I'll be explaining it, and you'll see just how easy it really is. So to do it without taking medication, there are two important factors that you have to do. And one, it would be to reduce the underlying glycemic state, or specifically reduce it to be less insulin favored and more glucagon favored. Now, the way we do this is actually with time and fasting, quite literally. So all we would have to do is we would have to fast for an extended period of time. Now, for some people, this can be 16 to 8 hours. It really depends on how quickly your body can change from glycolysis to gluconeogenesis. But then again, once it does change, if you are not used to using your fat cells as an energy source, or your body isn't in particular, then you won't get as much energy, or you won't feel as much energy from this whole fasting thing. So it really depends on your underlying glycemic state and how used to your body is doing this. So besides the fancy science talk, the way to do this, or one way to do this, could be you would fast for 16 hours, and then you would eat during an 8-hour window, and then you would sleep again for another 8 hours, and then you fast for 8 hours, and then you eat for 8 hours. You have an 8-hour eating window, and then you basically repeat that over and over again. Now, the weight loss occurs in the first place because of one crucial hormone, and that is hormone-sensitive lipase. Now, hormone-sensitive lipase only comes about when glucagon is primarily favored. And when glucagon is primarily favored, then hormone-sensitive lipase is able to do exactly what it needs to do, which is break down the fat cell and basically use it and convert it into energy. And that's called lipolysis, and that's breaking the fat cell. Now, in the process of all of this, your body actually will stop using glucose as an energy source for everything that it needs, which it actually doesn't want in the first place. And it will go through something called gluconeogenesis, where it will convert and make its own glucose. However, it will do something a little bit interesting, which is you will start using fatty acid as an energy source, which actually your mitochondria prefers, and you get quite literally 4 times as much ATP from using fatty acid rather than glucose, and you get 3 times as much energy in terms of calories from using fatty acid compared to glucose. And again, you're not damaging your mitochondria in the process, and that has to do with deuterium and basically jamming. I'm not going to talk about that, but to keep it really short, it's a much better energy source. And you might be wondering, well, what fat does this target exactly? This targets specifically visceral fat. Now, this can also target brown adipose tissue as well, but for the people who are very interested in losing weight, this will target the visceral fat, which is the fat around the belly or the fat around this area. So yeah. Now you might say, how do I do all of this in the first place? How do I reduce and how do I undo the insulin to glucagon dependence that I have, and primarily the fact that it's more dependent on insulin? How do I, just to keep it simply, how do I lose weight? Well, I talk about something in my previous video called why is the carnivore diet safe, or is it safe in the first place? And I explain a little bit more about that, and the carnivore diet is actually exactly what causes you to lose weight in the first place, and that's because it primarily favors glucagon to be formed, and that has to do with how fat is basically introduced to the body, and fat with protein on top of that only causes a skyrocketing increase of glucagon, and increasing a skyrocketing increase of glucagon will also cause a rapidly amount of fat to be burned. So if you're interested in that, I recommend you check out that video. So thanks for watching. If you learned something, then please give the video a like. It helps a lot. If you're interested in more videos like this, where I talk about the science behind things, please subscribe to the channel because I plan on making a lot more videos like that, as well as reactionary videos talking about how a lot of the other people don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to nutrition. And I'll be going over the science behind all of that and critiquing all of it with mostly biochemistry, because all of this can be explained simply through biochemistry, although there will be some endocrinology involved as well, most likely. And yeah, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I read all the comments for the most part. And if you want to see more videos like this, or you have a particular video idea, then please let me know. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Peace.